We are live. Welcome to the Joe Wallis podcast, My Veteran Experience. And today I'm pretty excited to speak to two people that I've known for 2 or 3 years, but we'll get into that a little bit, known them for quite a while. So, first we have, and I'll just be respectful, it's Commander Dimitri Delgado, United States Coast Guard retired, and Noel Barham Delgado, also from the Coast Guard. And excited to have them. I just to be up front, I've known them for a number of years. We were in Rota, Spain together as kids in high school and having fun like these Navy brats do when we live overseas. We can't go into all the details of that, but you never know. So, welcome. Thanks to you guys for being here with me today.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
And I'm thankful that we didn't have smartphones back in the day where we could have got caught for all the stuff we did.
That is true. I think the record of what we did might have been incriminating, especially on some.
It's all stories. There's no proof.
That's right. The Sangria Shack, Angelo's Discoteca, all those things would have been a little bit dangerous today. So, well, good. Like I said, thanks for being here today. Those of you who may have listened to some of the other podcasts, My Veteran Experience, we kind of talk to folks about their military background and what they've done and how it sort of impacted what they do today. So with that, I'll just let each of you kind of tell your story, where you're from and where'd you grow up, and they're discussing who goes first, which is nice.
Doesn't matter.
So go ahead, Noel.
Okay. I have a little bit of a different story only because I was born in Madrid, Spain. My dad was originally worked for the department, actually the American Embassy in Madrid. So he was a teacher there. And I was born in Madrid. And then later on, he got a job at Torrejon Air Force Base. And he probably was there till I was 6. And then got a job in Rota, Naval Station, Spain. So since then, I was in Rota. So I pretty much had a different experience than some of the Navy brats, typical Navy brats, only because I stayed and everybody else kind of rotated around me, they would have their stints for 2-3 years. Sometimes people would be in Rota a little bit longer than that, but it was an interesting dynamic on that for me, only because people would come and go all the time. And I know for Navy brats, they would just be transplanted from one place to the next place to the next place, which is also difficult as well. Yeah. But for me, it was I stayed and everybody else kind of rotated. So that was just an odd dynamic growing up. But that's just something, that's all I knew. And then after that, I went to college. I was in the Army ROTC program. And then I got a billet to go to jump school at Fort Benning, Georgia, as an Army ROTC cadet. That was fun. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'm not a dirty, nasty leg, if anybody knows what that means. Are you a dirty, nasty leg?
I wasn't going to say something. I wasn't going to say anything, but okay.
Yeah.
I know what that is. Yeah.
Yeah, so the both of you probably are dirty, nasty legs. I'm not.
Probably.
We're many things.
Yeah, just anybody who's not didn't go to jump school, that's what they call them. There's two kinds of people in the world. Okay. Dirty, nasty legs and not.
All right.
But yeah, and then I didn't get the whole idea for the Army ROTC program was to get commissioned. But I think it was in office, Clinton. He started shutting down bases. He started kind of reallocating the money for Army ROTC or ROTC programs in, across the country. And one of my ROTC program got shut down. So I was either supposed to, and I was, I think, a junior at the time, I was going to have to transplant myself or just relocate to another college or just stay put and just finish. So I decided to stay put and finish. And so I graduated in December of, I think it was 92, went back to Spain to do some substitute teaching because one of the teachers had lupus. So I was there substitute teaching probably for about 6 months. And then went back to the United States and kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to relocate with my sister Johanna, who was an Army nurse at Fort Hood, Texas. And Eventually, just to make a kind of long story a little bit shorter, I entered the Coast Guard, enlisted. I wanted to do the OCS, but that was going to take a long process, and I just wanted to get my life going. I thought that I would just go into OCS once I was already enlisted and made rate, which is what I did. So I went in and became a radioman, but before that, I was on the cutter forward, just doing some Haitian-Cuban migration interdictions. After that, went to A school to become a radioman, and then I got shipped to Coast Guard Group Mauritius eventually. And during the TWA Flight 800 disaster, that was where I was stationed, and we did work that with NTSB and the FBI and all of that stuff. That was pretty monumental. And then I got out. Also went back to live with Johanna. I had a young son at the time. And I just started testing. I just started to love the EMT portions of things. So I thought I wanted to be a paramedic. So I took all my EMT basic, intermediate courses and started working for AMR, American Medical Response, in Las Vegas. And Las Vegas was booming at the time. They were growing exponentially. And so the fire departments were behind the 8 ball. So they were just needing fire department personnel because they were building more and more stations. So I tested and I got selected. I went to, before that I was also in school and graduated as a scrub tech. So I was also working as at the Sunrise Hospital in the cardiovascular pod. So they were grooming me to be a primary scrub. In big cases, there's usually 2 scrubs, a primary and a secondary. So they were grooming me to be primary. I was already a secondary. But at the time, I was also testing for the fire department. I got selected and then started the academy in October. And 9/11 happened, and it just spurred us to be firefighters even more. We were just so much more gung-ho. So it just meant something different after 9/11. So graduated as a firefighter, did my probation, and then eventually went to paramedic school. And then after paramedic school, I ended up going back to school to become a nurse. And so I was a registered nurse. So I would do part-time or per diem nursing in the ERs, and then I would just do my regular firefighting paramedic job. We did 24 on, 24 off. It's called a Kelly schedule.
Yeah, did you sleep at all during this?
Yeah, when you're young, you just go and go, and I just ended up able to do those kinds of things. But yeah, so that was quite the experience. And then just continued on with that. Eventually, I stopped doing the nursing just because I was testing for captain. And then eventually I became EMS1 later in my career. So I ended up doing 20 years, physical 20 years on the fire department. The last 3 years was an EMS1 field coordinator. And just briefly, that job is, there's only 3 of us for 3 platoons. And what we do is we cover and handle all frontline paramedic EMS types of situations, whether calls, reports that they're having, frontline equipment that fails. So we're mobile. We have our own unit, and we go to all the fires, all the major fires, all the major MCIs, and we're just integrated into the ICS that way. So I did the 20 years, and now I'm just very, very blessed to have a pension. And we retired. He was already retired. I retired. And now we live in sunny Tampa, Florida, just living our best life. In the meantime, just before I retired, we became pilots as well, and kind of finished up our pilot licensure here in Tampa. But he found us a beautiful plane. Bonanza, a V-tail Bonanza, 1975.
You get a little
He's
credit
pretty
there,
fun.
Dimitri. I was just throwing a little credit your way.
Yeah,
Go.
he did all the work.
I think we should do more podcasts because apparently that's the only time it happens.
That's not true.
Well, go ahead, finish up.
Yeah, that's not true. But yeah, so we have our pilot's license, general aviation, scuba too. And we are just absolutely blessed. I think tomorrow we're going to go to Miami, and we're flying to Miami. We're going to see the Raiders play the Miami Dolphins.
Awesome.
And it's just the freedom that we get from being pilots. It's incredible. So just completely blessed. 2 pensions. It's just a lot of hard work to get there, but we are really blessed.
You'll sleep when you're dead, right?
Yes, that's right.
My motto.
So I know
there's a couple
off
things.
a lot.
There's a couple things I'll comment on. And first of all, so you mentioned your sister Johanna, who I know quite well.
Yeah.
Also, but you grew up on a Navy base and you both went Army ROTC.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. I must say, those Navy guys must have not have been as
well, I can tell you that the only ROTC program that was available in my college was Army. Okay. But otherwise I probably would have done the Navy.
Okay. And then the second thing too is it's been great to see the attention on first responders that has really come about post 9/11, and the organizations that support first responders provide discounts, and see these companies and that will provide like kind of the online discount for military and first responders, which is great.
Yep.
So kind of cool, and that's a great. And when I talk about the Coast Guard with people, and I had a couple Coast Guard folks when I was at the prep school, and to me, the Coast Guard's just 24/7 operational.
Yeah.
You're not trained, you're not out. I mean, you do exercises like everybody else, but you're operational. I mean, it's live work, right? You're out interdicting.
The thing is, you don't need a war to go to work because it's
exactly. Yeah. So that's what you guys do. So which is super cool. And then you transition to this fully operational career, firefighting and EMT. So kind of cool. It's I'm sure you saw a lot of shit. Especially in Vegas. I mean, Vegas isn't exactly the, people see the glitz of people see the glitz of the Strip, but the Vegas is much more than the Strip.
Oh, there's I've been deep into the bowels of Las Vegas, and the last 3 years when I became EMS1 for the C platoon, because I'm more mobile and I get signed to multiple calls, more calls than I would have if I was just at a regular fire station, because I'm supposed to be present and be injected into the ICS. I saw far more that way than just going on my regular calls, 911 calls, even as on the rescue or on the engine. So it's just, there's quite a bit going on in that city, more than anybody even knows.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, good. Well, that was awesome to hear. And now it's the big guy's turn.
Yes.
I don't know how I follow that.
It's hard. It's going to be hard to compete. So
I did have the opportunity towards the end of her career to actually hang around with her and her, I'm a coastie, so I'll call them shipmates in the fire department, and they're really doing some heroic stuff. So I don't know how I follow that. I will say that I do want to preface any comments with the following facts. Okay. I've known her since she was about 12. Okay. You introduced me as Commander U.S. Coast Guard retired, and she just explained that she was a radioman in the Coast Guard. There was no fraternization going on. I don't.
that there's any record of, right?
Right. Yeah, and we didn't cross paths personally, but we were in the same place. So anyway, background. So Navy brat. I was born at Quonset Point, Rhode Island. We moved to Lemoore, California. I was there till 6th grade, and then we went on to Sigonella. Sigonella, 6th grade, 7th grade, part of 8th. Back to Lemoore, caught up with my friends that I had grown up with from age 4 through 6th grade. Thought, great, did our little sacrifice for the country. Now I get to go back to my life. Graduate from the 8th grade there, and was, the high school football coach came in to talk to us, and I was excited about being a Lemoore Tiger, and I was going to be going to high school. And at that point, Dad got orders to Yokosuka, Japan, VA 93 attached to Midway. And he had a choice between 1 year unaccompanied or 2 years accompanied. He chose unaccompanied, did one deployment and said, no, I'm not doing this, pack your bags. So I didn't get to go to Lemoore High School. I went to Yokosuka High School.
Yo High.
Yo High, the Red Devils. He was stationed out of Atsugi. We lived in Yokohama. He was commuting. And during football season, Yokosuka High School, Yo High was playing against Zama High School, and a fight broke out. And I was certainly fighting on behalf of my Red Devils against the Zama Trojans. And this is a true story. That very evening, after getting home from that fight, Dad informed me he was tired of the commute. We were moving to Atsugi, and I had to transfer to Zama High School, the school that I had just had the fight with. Very cool. So finish up there sophomore year on the Rota, Spain. And there's a junior and a senior. I'm a lifeguard in the summertime, and there's this cute little blonde 12-year-old running around that
just saying 12-year-old, I'm just okay.
Yeah, and I'm a junior in high school. This is a like 6th grader we're talking about, 7th grader we're talking about. I would have never known that some nearly 40 years later she'd wind up being my wife and my best friend and my partner.
Amazing.
So graduate from Rota. Now the military started. Now at this point, I'm of the belief that I've been serving in the military for 18 years. Granted, I was only a high school graduate, but I had gone to 2 elementary schools, 2 junior high schools, 3 high schools in 4 different countries, and I was done. So when I made all Europe in football out of Rota, and a 3-star general shows up at my house telling me and my father that I'm in West Point if I want it, and my dad shaking his head up and down. See the irony here? Army over there, and all of a sudden I got West Point at my house too. I quickly declined. I was not interested. I'd been in the military for 18 years as far as I was concerned, and I was going on to Purdue. So I did take a Navy ROTC scholarship to Purdue, and played football, and decided that I was going to catch up for the 18 years that I had missed. I was going to catch up overnight, and they had to come up with new and inventive places to put the decimal point on my GPA.
Was it like that scene in Animal House? Dimitri Delgado has no grade point average.
Yeah, worse than that. Okay, it was actually worse than that. I quickly went from these high SAT scores and ACT scores and colleges recruiting me to play football to a complete failure. I mean, and it was self-imposed. It was nobody's fault but mine. So I went back to Rota. They have University of Maryland courses there, so I made sure to jump in there to start getting my GPA back where it needed to be. Got that done, and then transferred and played football at the University of Memphis. Graduated. I went from a failure to a dean's list athlete who had to argue with instructors that I didn't actually cheat on that test. I did get a 95, you know what I mean? Because I had actually straightened out my behaviors. Okay, so at that point, graduated from college.
So real quick, people can't see, you're not standing up, so you're pretty tall. Just give your dimensions real quick. You don't have to say,
Then or now?
Now, like how tall, you're pretty tall.
Yeah, I'm 6'3".
Okay, so pretty tall, yeah.
In my playing days, I was a wide receiver, 6'3", about 215 or so.
Everybody's tall to me, so
Well,
except for Noel.
Yeah, except for me, probably. I'm a garden gnome compared to him.
Garden gnome.
We're about 250 now. So took a job with FedEx in the management and transferred out to San Diego. And after a couple years of that, I guess I had been away from that life long enough that I knew it was time to go into the family business, which is the military. My dad served 30 years like yours did and retired as a W-4 like your father did. So I get picked up for, and this is a convoluted chain of events, but I get picked up for AOCS with the Navy. In fact, I think you knew my recruiter. It was Napoleon McCallum.
I know who he is. I've met him a couple times.
Yeah, running back at Navy and was playing for the San Diego Chargers at the time and was doing recruiting duties. So he's my recruiter. Calls me back in and says, I got some bad news. It's going to be like a 2-year wait until you can go to Pensacola. And as I was driving home disappointed, I saw this Coast Guard sign, and I was like, I never even thought about them, but I had my paper with the Marine Corps and the Air Force, but wasn't interested in the Army. Went ahead and did the Coast Guard paperwork as a fallback plan. Get notified, I got picked up for AOCS with the Air Force, asked what I'm going to be doing. They said missile silo commander. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, it's 1990. Cold War is over, and I'm sure Minot is a wonderful town, but I'm really not interested. So I started bugging the Marine Corps for an answer. No answer. Coast Guard answers up, congratulations, your next class. I said, let me sleep on it. Called the Marine Corps, still no answer. I take the gig with the Coast Guard. I report to Yorktown, Virginia for OCS. First 5 weeks you're at OCS, you're off the planet. There's no news, newspapers, radio, TV, nothing. You're off the planet. And about 5 days into the course, my drill instructor informs me that I have a telephone call in his office. And it kind of scares me because I'm not supposed to be having outside contact. And I can remember my hand shaking as I put the phone up to my ear, expecting that somebody had passed away or something. And it's the Marine Corps recruiter saying, congratulations, you got picked up for OCS, you're going to Quantico. I didn't go. I stayed put. I probably should have, but that's another story. So I get commissioned off to New Orleans very briefly, and then to Boston on a 270-foot cutter. Ironically enough, Noel actually served on a sister ship, so I don't have to explain that tour duty to her at all because she did it.
Is that where the fraternization began? It was up there.
That's where it could have began, but yeah.
That could have been potentially a disaster.
Yeah. So
for who?
That would have been difficult because mine was in Boston, hers was in Portsmouth, Virginia. So that would have been a little difficult, but
a little bit of a commute. But hey,
yeah. So I had 2 careers. I got pre 9/11, post 9/11. Pre 9/11 was tactical law enforcement.
So what year did you enter the Coast Guard operation? Like, when did you get out of the training?
I got commissioned in February of 92.
92. Okay, got it.
92.
Okay, got it.
So between the cutter and then I went to a law enforcement detachment, I was officer in charge, and our job, we did a triangle. We did counter narcotics operations off of Navy ships in the Caribbean, busting cocaine shipments, and then we'd go to the Persian Gulf and enforce sanctions against Iraq, and then we'd go to Bosnia and enforce sanctions there, and that was great. I loved it. And then eventually I wound up, well, after LEDATs, I went to a Navy command in Mayport, Florida, and was actually training their ships how to take those law enforcement detachments with them. And then I went to Atlantic Area Headquarters in Portsmouth, and I was the law enforcement coordinator for the East Coast when 9/11 happened.
That's Virginia, right?
Portsmouth, Virginia, right. Now, it seems as if she and I are actually there about the same time, but never run into each other.
Again.
Yeah, never run into each other.
That 12-year-old's running around.
Yeah. So 9/11 happens, and my life, like everybody else's life, changes. There were only a few of us doing that, what they would have called weird Coast Guard stuff back in the day, meaning you're working jointly, you're working with the Navy, you're doing this law enforcement thing. The rest of us are doing search and rescue and oil spills and migrant operations, all those things that you just suggested happen on a daily basis with the Coast Guard. But there were a few of us doing this weird stuff. So they said, hey, congratulations. You're going to command the waterborne forces in Gitmo at JTF Gitmo. So I did that. So I took that gig. While I was down there, Congress mandated the establishment of 13 SWAT teams at the port level that were going to be just to name a few of the places. So, Boston, New York, Chesapeake, Virginia, Miami, Houston, all these places that had big shipping, big ports that could be terrorist targets. They were going to establish these SWAT teams. And I got a call down in Gitmo asking me if I wanted MSST New York or MSST San Francisco. My parents were in California, and I could have gone ahead and got close to mom and dad again, but you know, 9/11 is 9/11 and ground zero is ground zero. So I'll take New York. Took New York, stood that up, commanded that for 3 years, probably ran into a lot of the same people that you and I were discussing offline about these connected Marines and firefighters in New York. And we're probably, you know, most of the same people. Enjoyed that tour. And they said, wow, you really did a good job with that. So now you're going to PAC area in Alameda, California. You're going to teach Far East countries how to do this. Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, Korea, doing that weird coasty stuff. Got done with that, and he said, hey, you did a great job with that. Now you're going to U.S. Central Command in Tampa, Florida to work for General Petraeus and teach the Middle East countries how to do it. So now it's Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Kuwait and UAE and Bahrain. Great, great tour. And then from there, I went to Miami to be the Chief of Operational Planning for the 7th Coast Guard District. Now, the irony about that job, and that was my final
just
job.
real quick, is that on that base right across the bridge, that Miami base?
No, that's
right?
that sector. They worked for me, but we were in the federal building down at Brickell Plaza.
Oh, Brickell. Okay, yeah, I know Brickell. Yeah, I lived in Miami for a while, so I used to go to that the sector base, as you call
Copy.
it. I didn't know it's called sector base, but
so sector Miami, sector San Juan, Puerto Rico, sector St. Pete worked for me. Air stations Miami, Borinquen, Clearwater, and Savannah. But here's the irony. So back when I was a law enforcement detachment officer in charge, and I would sit on these Navy ships in the Caribbean busting cocaine shipments, I would often wonder in my off time, who was the knucklehead that decided which ship I went to, which box I operated in, how long I operated in it. And I was sitting at my desk in Miami one day, and I was working out the schedule for these law enforcement detachments and which ship they were going to go on and which box they were going to operate in. And I realized who the knucklehead was. I had actually,
you became that knucklehead, right?
Yeah. So I went ahead and retired out of there. Came back to the Tampa area, which is where I was at during CENTCOM time. My kids from the previous relationship were here. So I had I was coming up for 06, and they said, you got to go to DC. I said, no, you got to, the divorce was brand new. You got to find me something in Florida. And they said, you're too senior for that. You got to leave. I said, no, actually I can retire. So I did. I decided to really retire. I became a scuba instructor and was teaching scuba here in Florida in the Keys and having a great time. And Noel and I reunited. And I told her that while I was very fond of her already, I was not moving to Las Vegas. And
I'm very fond of you, but Vegas is not on the
list. We
list.
had just started dating. What was I going to say? I'm head over heels in love with you. So very fond of you.
You never know, right?
And I don't know. 5-6 months later, I'm living in Las Vegas. So
the Barham girls are
they're charmed.
Just to let y'all know, so I know Noel's family quite well, and her sister, who she mentioned earlier. I used to play tennis with her when she was an 8th grader.
My parents loved you,
and thank you very much.
They still do.
I still do. But I used to play tennis with your sister Johanna when she was an 8th grader. She was a really good tennis player, but I just remember I got to know you guys quite well.
So retired, went out with to her, and we got married in August of 2020. She wrapped up her career in January of 22. We loaded up and moved back to the house that I had already bought here in Tampa. And
so were those subtle hints about Vegas isn't the place I want to stay in a while? Were you dropping those subtle hints over time? That, hey,
I don't know. I don't complain.
Tampa's nice.
It's a cool town.
It's a great town. It's a wonderful
I
town.
like Vegas. I love
It's
Vegas.
a wonderful town. I know that most people, when they think of Vegas, they just think of gambling and the Strip, but there is a whole world out there that is family oriented.
But I'll say this: when you're a Navy brat and a water dog and a coastie and a scuba diver, Lake Mead's just not enough.
I mean, I love the desert. I think the desert's
beautiful.
And but I'm sort of a water, kind of become a mountain person the last 10 years.
And the other thing too is, as you know, my family is in Texas. His family is here. His parents are here in Tampa. So my son is still in Las Vegas. He's going to be graduating from AMP school, which is the airframe and power plant school.
Awesome. That's great.
He's graduating September 2nd. So we'll be flying over there to see his graduation. So he's still there, and he probably will stay there until he gets a a job in that field.
Yeah.
And I don't know where he might end up going. He wants to do some contracting work, military contracting work as a AMP. So he's working with the school right now to see if he can get that going.
Super cool.
You
So
know,
Dimitri, real quick, I know I've seen you on Facebook over the years. You got into horses a little bit, so talk a little bit about that.
yeah, that happened when I was commanding the unit in New York. I was working
Oh,
24
you got
hours.
it started a long time ago. I thought it was something in retirement.
Yeah, about 2005. I love that job, so this is not a complaint, but I was working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I had sailors that I was responsible for. I had a brand new unit I had to train. It was busy, and no complaints, but I needed something other than work. And it'd be too long of a story for me to tell you how I got into it, but bought a little 8-month-old colt who's now an 18-year-old stallion and a half, and he and I took a wonderful voyage showing. We showed in Vegas and Scottsdale and U.S. Nationals, and it was cool. Bred a couple. One has passed, kept one, and we have 3 now. And Noel and I are out there 2-3 times a week. They're at a full service facility, so we can travel with the airplane and do that kind of stuff without.
Nice.
But the thing I was going to wrap up my introduction is, people often bothered me as I was retiring that you got this special set of skills. You can go back to CENTCOM, you can go to SOCOM, you can go work for NAVCENT, you can do all these things. And I think your father, God bless him, would have said the Navy he got out of was not the Navy he joined. My father certainly says the Navy he joined. You probably say that about your Marine Corps. I'd certainly say that about my Coast Guard, that, people ask if I miss it. And the truth is, the things that I was missing, I was already missing because I was senior enough to not do them anymore. I wasn't climbing up the ladders or going out the helicopter or busting the cocaine anymore. So it wasn't like I was missing anything. And given the state of the military, the state of this country and politically and everything else, I didn't want any part of it. I just didn't want any part of it.
Yeah. Well, the people talk about, I was having this discussion just yesterday. I was doing a USO event, and people don't realize other services like outside of the Marine Corps, that the Marine Corps churns like 25% every year. So the Marine Corps recruits for 4 years for on the enlisted side for 4 years.
Yeah.
And then they're gone. I mean, a large percentage of those folks that enlist, they leave the Marine Corps within that 4-year contract period. So the Marine Corps churns large numbers. It's a young man's game. It's what I call a trigger. It's a trigger puller's game. So we bring in Marines to be young and do their work, and as some people call it, we're the 911 force, whatever you want to say about the Marine Corps. We churn numbers, and so it makes the force a little bit different, and a little bit different anyway. But all of the services are unique in their own way. And post 9/11, as you know, the Coast Guard really integrated quite a bit with the rest of the services. And I was fortunate in my last couple of commands being at the COCOM level to do the interagency work, which was just super cool to work with agencies across that. So one thing I wanted to kind of get into, and it's interesting, you both bring such a different perspective, and Noelle spoke to it earlier, where she was the kind of an anchor person there, living in Rota her whole time, and then she saw these people move in and out every 2 to 3 years. And same with me, as you mentioned, my father did 30 years in the Navy, and we moved around quite a bit. I was born in Rota, and we went to San Diego, and my father was just gone. He was in a squadron on a ship, and we didn't see much of him. So I don't think I really spoke much English till I was about 4 or 5 years old, because I was just my mother.
Well, for all practical purposes, I didn't have a dad till I was about 13, 14 years old, right?
And then he was a stern disciplinarian dad that kind of sat there and said, I think you could do better, son.
Well, that or he sees you doing something at the age of 18, like changing oil.
Right.
And he's got this, and he's got this baffled look on his face because he wasn't around when you learned how to do that. You're about 8 years old in his eyes.
Yeah.
Right, and he's like, "What are you doing?" Yeah.
So in that sense, and we, like I said, all 3 of us experienced it in a different way. I'll just go to, well, I mean, you saw these people. I mean, it's the same thing. You're losing friends every 2 or 3 years, just like we did, even though, but you're staying in the same place and they're moving on, where we were moving on and our friends were staying or going somewhere else as well. And it kind of, I keep in touch with a number, and Facebook has been instrumental in reconnecting with people. And it's interesting too, where the both of you reconnected, because I know there's at least three, maybe four other couples who were in Rota at the same time who did not initially come together and are now married
Mhm.
and living their lives together. So kind of talked a little bit about that, Noel, and sort of was it difficult seeing folks leave that you became close friends with? How did you view all that?
You know, I spoke with a couple of people, kids like myself, like Heidi Christensen, Barbara Graves. These were all, and even Julia Espinoza, the Espinosas. I don't know if you know them, but they were all, children of teachers that just work there. And there is just a weirdness about how you view relationships. It took a while to know that that kind of wasn't normal, in a way that, okay, if you don't like this person, it's okay. You're not going to see them in the next year or so. They're gone. You know what I mean? And just growing up with that mentality kind of made relationships fleeting a little bit. So you knew, you were smart enough to know that that wasn't a normal way to think of relationships, but it was just hard to get out of the habit of, here now but gone tomorrow type of thing. So that was a little hard to kind of get past a little bit.
She will get upset if you say you're from Rota, Spain.
Yeah, it's
It's
funny.
like, you were there for 2 years. What do you mean you're from Rota, Spain?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah, from Rota.
I
Yeah, I was
sometimes,
born there, so I can say that. I'm tied to Rota for the rest of my life. So I
yeah,
was,
so I see people on Facebook that were there for like just 2 years, and they say they're from there,
What
and
do
I'm
they say?
thinking,
okay.
Rota Nation?
Well,
no, you're not.
well,
You're not from there. You
well, you
spent 2 years.
mentioned a couple of families, so I knew, like, from our, I mean, you're a little bit younger than us, so like Monica Diego was there for many years.
Yeah.
Marie Clayka was there for many years. The Hedricks were there for a number of years, and their parents did different things. Like the Hedricks, our vice principal, and then I think Monica's father worked as a civilian, and so
The
yeah,
Davidsons?
that
Yeah.
yeah.
The
So and then
Richardson.
so go ahead. Finish up. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah. So it's just, how do I feel about that? It just took a while to get used to, when once you left Rhoda and you went into the world to live your life and to start your life. You go to college, you join the military, it's just that notion of um stability, consistency. When I went into the fire department, this was normally a 30-year career. I have never been longer in any one place for maybe. Rhoda was the first time that I was, I was there for 17 years. But then after that, I was in one place for maybe 1 year, 2 years. College was 4. But once I entered into the civilian world with a legitimate job as a firefighter paramedic with the city of Las Vegas, where your people don't rotate anymore. You stay there. It's a consistency. That was the first time where, you knew you had to nurture these relationships, where in the past, it didn't really matter, because these people were going to be gone and out of your life shortly. You know what I mean? So that reality of consistency was not hard, but just something that I had to work on. You know what I mean?
And it's
Um,
ironic because that's the reality on active duty too, right? You have a boss you don't like, they're going to rotate, they're going to go out.
yeah,
Um,
it's just an interesting dynamic.
she and I graduated from the exact same high school, but have very, very different views of the experience, different views of the relationships.
Now, how many years were you in? Were you in Rota for just
The
junior,
family
senior
was
year?
there for 4. I was only there for 2.
Yeah, so junior, senior year. So I was just
Yeah,
there
and
for
my
senior.
brother was a freshman through senior. He got to go to one high school, which was amazing. But I've often said there's two different types of veterans that serve in the military. There are veterans who serve, and then veterans who served not only as kids but as veterans in uniform as well. Two different sets. Because you think, I'm from Wichita, Kansas. I go to the branch of the military that I choose. I do my 4 years. I go back to Wichita, Kansas. Is a much different experience than I did 18 years at 4 different schools, blah, 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 5 countries, everything else. Then I did my 20. It's just a different experience. So, but to relationships, I can remember my mother. My mother's Greek, and she sat me aside at about the age of 15, 16, and she said, "I want to talk to you about girls." And I said, "Oh, no, I'm not having this conversation with my mother." She goes, "No, not that. I'll let your dad handle that aspect of it."
Yeah.
Most Greek women want their sons to marry Greek women. And she said, "I'm not one of those, and I'm not going to put that pressure. White, Hispanic, African American, Native American, whatever, whoever you fall in love with, it's fine with me. If you bring a Turk to my house, we're going to have problems." But my suggestion to you is that you do marry somebody from your own culture. I said, "Hold on a second. You just told me you didn't care if I married a Greek." She said, "That's not your culture. The military is your culture." That having the adaptability and the moving that you did, the reason that Noel and I think, have different views of those relationships from Rota, which is what our common experience was, is that you and I, because you were in Japan with where I was at, we learned you're going to be here 2 years. You better make your friends fast. And you better make the relationship worthwhile for those 2 years so that you have somebody. She, on the other hand, probably learned very quickly that, man, if I establish this relationship, I'm just going to get hurt by it because they're leaving in 2 years or they're leaving in a year, which I think would lead somebody to probably avoid any depth in the whole thing. So the translation and what happens is, I got my friends on Facebook and I'll say, "Hey, look who so-and-so's doing." And she'll say, "Who's that?" "Well, they were there when you were there." "Yeah, but I didn't pay attention to it," type of answer,
Now, just real quick to Yokohama, what housing area did you live in Yokohama?
Oh man, I don't remember the name of it. I remember their big green houses.
There were Area 1, there was Area 1, Area 2, and then officer housing was Bayview, and there was Negishi.
Oh, it was Bayview. It was Bayview.
Yeah,
It was Bayview.
there was Negishi. So your father was a warrant officer at the time.
No, he was actually a lieutenant at the time. My dad's
lieutenant.
he's got a weird career. So he was
Okay.
enlisted.
Yeah.
Made Master Chief. He was Master Chief for a day because he got notified that his commanding officer put him in for the LDO program.
LDO, right? Yep.
So
yeah,
he
you
got
can do that
commissioned
in the Navy. If you can promote the E9 and then also be selected, and
Yeah.
you have to make a choice at that point, though.
So he got commissioned as an ensign, went to Enterprise. From Enterprise, we went to Sigonella, Japan. He had made lieutenant by that point. And then when he was at the end of his career, he was not going to be, he didn't have enough time to get in zone for 04. So he reverted from 03 to W4 for the pay purposes. A little funny story.
Your dad, because my father was in Sigonella too. So interesting, your dad and my dad.
Yeah.
Well,
here's funny. I'm a JG in the Coast Guard on a Coast Guard cutter in Gitmo for ref tray. This Navy writer gets on board. I'm sitting on the mess deck. He looks at me as a chief. He said, "Lieutenant J.G. Delgado, holy cow, are you ever going to get promoted?" And he walks away. So a little while later, I run into him and I said, "That was kind of weird. What was that?" And he goes, "Oh, you wouldn't understand. I was stationed in Sigonella, Sicily with a Lieutenant J.G. Delgado." And I said, "Yeah, that was my dad. When are you getting promoted?"
Yeah.
It's a small world. I mean,
Yeah.
you probably have these experiences too. I've met people from Torrejon High School on the tarmac in Gitmo. I've met, people I went to school. Oh, I did a deployment to the Adriatic. I was with the America Battle Group. We moved over to the GW Battle Group, got on my new ship, and the helicopter crew that was on there was a female pilot standing in the passageway. And she asked me, "Which pilots were on the ship you just came from?" So I started naming off these pilots that I had been hanging with. She yells into her stateroom to another female pilot, "Hey, so-and-so is on the other ship." That pilot comes face to face. And I said, "I know you." And she thought it was a come on. She says, "No, you don't." And I said, "Yeah, you went to high school in Rota. I know your face."
Yeah.
And anyway, so she had been a younger girl at Rota when I was in high school, and we got reunited there on the ship. Her in the Navy, me in the Coast Guard, enforcing UN sanctions. It's a tiny world.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's sometimes when you tell your story to somebody who just doesn't understand or didn't grow up in the military, they're sort of like, wow, you lived in Japan and you lived in San Diego and Florida and all that kind of stuff. And it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, we are afforded that opportunity and we probably don't realize it. I mean, I lived in Japan, so I was born in Spain. I didn't remember it as a little kid. And then San Diego, and then we did go to Memphis. We were in Millington for, my dad went to a long school. I think I think he had made chief and they sent him to
Yeah, my
school.
father wound up being an instructor at Millington. So
Yeah,
we
so
all,
I was 4 years old. I remember we lived in a duplex home, uh, and in Millington,
Millington.
and then we went to Japan.
By the way,
And
you know who's from Millington?
Who?
Justin Timberlake's from Millington.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, there you go. There's your tie-ins.
The Memphis Blue, the Memphis, yeah. What do they call him? The Memphis. He's good. I like. Yeah,
He is very talented.
It's just ironic that the speck of a town that is Millington, that's where he's from.
It is a speck of a town. It's just a suburb of Memphis, sort of. Yeah, I'd always say I lived in Memphis. I never said I lived in Millington when I told people about.
Yeah, right.
And then Japan, which was really a formative time. I was 10 to 13 years old, and I keep in touch with a lot of those folks, and again, reconnected through Facebook, and I've been to, and as you know, we have our reunions, right? There's the Rota reunion, and then Yohai and Japan. It's cool to see all these people, but yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. I remember, and Dimitri, you say your mother's Greek and my mother's Spanish, and we were living. I remember back before the internet, communicating with my father when he was overseas. This was kind of maybe Vietnam era. There was the Mars radio.
Either Mars or a cassette.
And you had to say over. You had to say
Yeah.
over because someone's connecting you. And my mother hated that. So she would tell my dad, don't even call. I just wait till you get home because I don't feel like doing this over stuff every time we're speaking. And because my father would go, and back then, deployments were longer than 6 months. I remember he did like a 9-month deployment.
That's tough.
Well, believe it or not, Coast Guard cutters in the Caribbean use them still. The Mars.
Yeah, and they were back then. They could grow beards. I remember my dad showed back up with the beard when he was chief and all that. So that's I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because growing up as the military brat or military dependent, whatever you want to call it, is a unique upbringing. I mean, I know there's people that travel around with State Department parents. It's very unique as well, and it's real different too because you live in capitals and you're part of this State Department community of and then there's expat community. I experienced that a little bit when I lived in Madrid. I lived in an area of Madrid that had a lot of people who were with the State Department and then expats whose companies had them in Madrid. So it was a really interesting community of people to meet who also moved around every couple of years to a different capital, and it was kind of cool. There was some similarities there. So we're and as I said earlier, talking about your and we both, or all three of us, went into the military, and we grew up on bases, and we spent time differing time frames in the military. So what drew you to the Coast? I mean, I know you kind of talked about it earlier, but was there something specific that the Coast Guard that drew you to the Coast Guard? I mean, besides
me or her?
Well, both of you, because you're both served in the Coast Guard. So go ahead, Noel. What was it that drew you to the Coast Guard?
Well, initially, I wanted to go into the Marine Corps. And so I went into the Marine Corps recruiter's office.
Oh, yeah.
When I went back into the United States, when I was in the United States, I was in college, and I think it was the Gulf War was kicking off. And I knew my mom wanted me to finish my college degree before I went into the military. But I just went in there anyway, just to see. And I had a terrible experience there in that Coast Guard recruiting office.
Marine Corps.
I mean, Marine Corps recruiting office. It was terrible.
Was he a dick?
Yeah, he was a pompous
Oh,
asshole
Yeah, you get some of
and
those
very
parents,
demeaning. Like, I mean, they look down on women, at least when I went in there. And I don't know.
Was your mother worried about you in going into the Marine Corps or doing the military at all?
No, because she knew, because I think I talked to her a long time ago when I was in high school that I wanted to join the French Foreign Legion. I mean, I was looking into that. That's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be plucked up, trained, and then set free to do what I needed to do. That's what I wanted to do.
So
That
for
was,
all you viewers out there, yes, I am married to a badass.
no, no, not at all. Just, yeah, I mean,
I
that
agree
was
with you, Dimitri. I agree with you on that one.
Come on,
that
man.
was
French
just,
Foreign Legion, registered nurse, firefighter, Coast Guard member, EMT. Yeah, badass.
not at all, but yeah, so that was some of the things that I wanted to do, and they absolutely did not accept women in the French Foreign Legion, at least when I inquired about it, and there wasn't a whole lot of people that even knew about the French Foreign Legion. So I just did what I needed to do. I went into college, and then the war kicked off, and I graduated high school in '88. So this was all happening, what,
88
'89.
from high school. Okay.
Yeah, I graduated high school in '88. So the war was what, 89, 89, 90?
Desert Storm,
Desert Storm.
Yeah,
89, 90. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went into the recruiting office and I just was completely deflated. I was the Marine Corps was
Marine.
next to God. I was just completely deflated. So, but I still wanted to serve. So I just finished my degree. You know, I went back into I went to Rota, and I did my my substitute teaching, but I still wanted to go into the military. And I just thought, okay, I speak Spanish. That was one of my my major was Spanish literature with a minor in psych. Completely worthless degrees. It was freaking worthless. I just wanted to get it over with. So I was thinking, well, what can I do? I speak Spanish, and the Navy was always
And you're a
surrounded
bad-
by the
wait,
Navy.
wait, so, and you're a badass. So go ahead.
Oh God, no, no, not at all.
And there's that.
Not at all, not at all. But so I was just thinking, well, what I'm familiar with the Navy, but I wanted just to do something different than what I was familiar with. So I'm like the Coast Guard. And I have to say though, when I went into boot camp, I went in great shape, but I got out in bad shape. So it's very, at least when I went in, it's very academic centric.
Okay,
And not
not as physical.
very physical. I mean, I had to request PT, not PT as in like runs, just so that we get out and run, just get on the beach and run, because it was in Cape May, New Jersey, was where our boot camp was.
Cape May, New Jersey. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and it was just very academic, lots of tests, very centric that way, and it just wasn't. Boot camp was just a little bit disappointing. I hope I don't offend anybody.
Well, no.
Because in my mind, boot camp is like
supposed to be hard and physical.
hard. It was, I mean, academically, it was test after test after test after test. Yep, fine. But the rest needed to be much more challenging, I thought, because I'm just thinking Marine Corps, it could be, I know nothing's quite like the Marine Corps boot camp, but it needed to be something close to that, somewhere in between. And I was just very disappointed with that. But
yeah, I did a tour at MCRD San Diego. So I did a tour there.
Yeah,
was a recruit commander for 6 cycles of the recruit training. But yeah, we take them to Pendleton in the middle, the second phase, for 4 weeks. So there's a lot of hills, and it's pretty physical. The Marine Corps boot camp, I think, is unique. And there's a big rivalry between Parris Island Marines and San Diego Marines.
Yeah, San Fleas.
San Diego Hollywood Marines.
Yeah.
San Fleas and the mountain, right?
San Fleas versus mountains, exactly. So that's exactly what it is. Well, cool. So awesome.
Yeah.
How about you? Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, me, I volunteered already that I was going in the Navy, and I was told there was going to be a 2-year wait. I didn't want to wear an ascot in some missile silo in Minot.
I'm with you. You didn't want to live on a golf course and a BOQ and on a nice Air Force base.
You know, it's funny. I was a political science major, and this dude's telling me, he says, "Look, you're gonna have a master's degree in computer science by the end of your pipeline." I'm like, "You're not selling it, man. It's just,
Exactly.
it's just
That's
not
not
happening."
sexy.
You know, I'm gonna be
Here's your
ordered to
ass
kill my partner if they don't do what we're ordered to do, and whatever. It was fine.
Yeah.
Marine Corps didn't have an answer, so when the Coast Guard. But I'll tell you, just like any organization, there's pros and cons to the Marine Corps. There's pros and cons to the Navy. There's pros and cons to the Coast Guard. Some of the pros of the Coast Guard, and most people don't know this, and even I didn't know this as a Navy brat. It's a branch of the military, but it's not in the Department of Defense.
Mhm.
And it's not in the Department of Defense because of law. After the Civil War, when Northern troops were sent down to the South for Reconstruction, they were a little heavy-handed against Johnny Reb, and the Southern states complained, and they drafted a law called Posse Comitatus, which says you cannot use, and originally it was just to the Army, but now all the branches, you can't use the military to enforce civil law. So when we see the stuff that's going on around this country, and they say, wow, they should just put the National Guard on this, or they should put the Marine Corps on this, well, we have laws that preclude you from using the military to enforce civil law.
Right.
Because the Coast Guard has a civil law mission in terms of counter narcotics and other issues, they cannot be in the Department of Defense. Now, that's as a department. There are Coast Guard personnel that are chopped Title 10 to the military, and I was one of those, that you are working for the DOD. But that aside, same pay scale, same rate, same benefits, same BAH, same everything. And at the end of the day, the exact same pension.
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting is that I can remember, you know, in the Navy, for instance, and this is not me bad-mouthing Navy, this is just reality. You probably have to wait till you're about an 05 to get command.
It's easy to do, Dimitri.
I know it is, and my SAT scores were too high to get in the Navy anyway, but that aside.
It's easy to do.
You got to wait till you're like an 05 to get command in the Navy, whether it's a ship or a squadron or anything else. You got to do your department head, you got to do your XO tour and everything else.
Right.
You get your command as an 02 in the Coast Guard. You got 02s commanding ships and 02s that had law enforcement detachments, and I had 3 commands during my tenure. So there's a plus. But it'd be interesting, like when you're okay. Let's look at Posse Comitatus for a second. You're a Coast Guard law enforcement detachment on a Navy ship. Why? Because the Navy ship can't do law enforcement. It's got to have Coast Guard personnel do law enforcement. Can you imagine the dynamic? And I used to live this all the time. You're an 02 on an Aegis class cruiser with an 05 commanding officer. A boarding's about to happen. The Coast Guard ensign gets run up the mast of the ship, and the ship chops over to the 7th District Commander Coast Guard in Miami. And all these 02s, 03s, and 04s on that ship are watching a Coast Guard 02 telling 05 where to put it and how to put it. Interesting dynamic. And there were times where I'd have screaming matches with an 05 as an 02 just because of cultural differences, you know. Anyway, so those are the pros.
Oh, cool.
Some of the cons. The Coast Guard likes being in the military when it's convenient. And then they like being civilians the rest of the time.
Yeah.
You know, you could be an 02, walk into an 05, 06's office, finish your business there and say, buy your leave, and have that 06 say, no, we don't do that around here. And as a military brat who wanted to join the military, I was probably considered too militant for the Coast Guard sometimes.
You like to be squared away a little bit.
Yeah. You know, I can remember
like it's supposed to be.
My unit deployed my unit deployed to cover the G8 conference when it was in Savannah. I arrived after the fact, after they had deployed, run into the Coast Guard 06, who's in charge of the entire operation. I only have 100 people in this operation. He's in charge of the whole thing, and says, hey, can you do me a favor? And we knew each other because he was one of my instructors at OCS. He said, can you do me a favor? So what's that? And he said, can you get your people to stop saluting me?
Oh, right.
No. If we were in a combat zone and you were wearing subdued collar devices and you were going to get sniped, sure, we'll secure that. You're in Savannah, Georgia, you're in 06, and I'm not going to tell an E3, we saluted yesterday, but not today, type of thing. So,
yeah, I mean, I kind of like the discipline and the traditions of the Marine.
Me too.
And I like the Marine kind of mentality of that you're a Marine first. It's like
Yeah.
You're a rifleman
you're a
first.
rifleman first.
That's
That's
right.
why we go to for officer school. Everyone goes to the basic
That's right.
school. You do
The other
six
thing I was
months and then
impressed, yeah, the other thing I was impressed with with the Marine Corps later on in my career when I was doing joint operations is this notion that, see, in the Coast Guard, everything's driven by personality. So one Coast Guard district will be different than another Coast Guard district just because of personalities. Where in the Marine Corps, whether you're in Pendleton or Lejeune, it's the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
right.
And
That's why we don't wear patches that say,
yeah,
this and that.
I
Because
love the fact that if you're part of a MEU and an event happens and you hit the beach and that '06 is commander of the MEU, and then it gets bigger, so a MEF has to come in. That '06 already knows he's going to be the G3 and
Yeah.
not the 00 anymore. I just love that.
Yeah, we don't. We could spend a long time talking about the greatness of the Marine Corps, but let's move on. But
Well,
let's
you guys
move
are
on.
very proficient about eating crayons. That's for
Well,
sure.
the biggest compliment I ever heard, and this was from an Army major who happened to be assigned to the MEF. I think it was the MEF headquarters. It might have been division for Fallujah, and so he was observing all this, and he said, "Hey, man, I'm glad you guys are on our side."
Yeah,
That was
no
his
doubt.
compliment to the Marine Corps was that
You bet.
It's a
so whatever. It's
consistency of
yeah,
excellence.
it's cool. My father wanted me to be in the Navy and be a Navy jet pilot because he worked on jets as he was a young
Yeah.
enlisted man, and I deeply disappointed him when I decided to go Marine Corps because I didn't really play it up too at the academy. I didn't play up that I was going to go Marine Corps. I didn't wear the high and tight or I didn't like when I selected Marine Corps. Some of my buddies were asked me if I'd been drinking or was there or did I lose a bet or whatever it might have been. And
Yeah.
at the time, my father's commander, my father was in Pensacola, the training command, where they switched between Navy commanders and Marine Corps commanders. His commander was a Lieutenant Colonel Marine for the train for VT-86, and from what I understand, he went in his office and told he goes he said something like "You sons of bitches took my son away from me," something like that. And it was
I have to
but
tell you,
yes,
I was surprised when I heard that you went into the Marine Corps because your personality is is so jovial and happy and bubbly and I just view the Marines as just
yeah.
very
Yeah,
Well, you
but the
mentioned
untold story is that the lieutenant colonel said, "Do you want him back?" And your father said no. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you say that, Noel, and yeah, it was what drew me to the Marine Corps were a lot of different things: the physicality, um, the spirit, all these things you talk about.
small unit.
Well, I had a couple of officers, starting with my neighbor in Rota, Spain, who was a Marine at the time, first lieutenant and then captain at the barracks, Jeff Patterson, and Jeff was a huge influence on me. And then I had Marine Corps. My company officer at the Naval Academy was a Marine
mhm,
and not a Naval Academy graduate. Um, and my leadership instructor was a Marine major who actually spoke to me about the Marine Corps. So there were these influences, and I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to lead people. That was really what I wanted to do, was to lead people. And I realized, and people can debate me on this, that I was going to have more of an opportunity to lead people
mhm.
in much closer way as a Marine in my early years as a Marine than I would have had in Navy. So that's what really drew me, is I wanted to lead people and have an impact on people. So it fit me, but I'm not the typical Marine. I mean, I'm not the high and tight guy. I'm not me. I'm not serious. I mean, people. I mean, I like to cut it up and have fun, but when it comes down to getting the job done, I think
Yeah.
I can get the job done too. So there's some things I focus on
Mhm.
and I'm serious about, and it's time to get serious and busy. I get busy, but other times I like to have fun
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. So, well, something else I kind of want to go over. You both are now retired, which is great. You have a
Yes.
plane and all these cool things, which I just
Mhm.
envy. because I started late in life with children, and I still have which I'm super blessed and no regrets at all. But my youngest is going to be a junior in high school, and super focused. And then my other took a gap year this last year after graduating from high school, and now is going to study in Spain. She's going to get her degree in Spain in Madrid.
Nice.
Great. So what does retirement mean to you? Like sort of what
Can I go first?
Yeah, of course.
what lights you up every morning when you wake up?
Yeah.
Besides the person next to you.
Yes. Well, he does for sure.
I'll get into that in a second, but if you don't mind, there's something else I'd like to get involved in, and I think it's true of all veterans. There is a truth to the fact that whether you do 4 years or 10 years or 20, I mean, obviously, the longer you're in, the more institutionalized you wind up being, and I think for all veterans, there's a transition difficulty when you come back into the civilian world, and the civilian world doesn't think like you have over the last 4 years, 8 years, 10, 12, whatever. We were laughing about the fact that I had signed on to this website here 15 minutes early, because that's just how we do it. And you come into the civilian sector and people don't think that way. And I do think veterans have always had a tough time kind of transitioning into that, where you're not supposed to get out of your lane. That's your MOS, that's your job, that's what you do. And then you come to the civilian world where there are no lines. Things kind of blurred, and there's backstabbing going on, and everybody's, if you stab me in the back of the military, you're not going to get promoted to 04 any faster than you were going to get promoted anyway. We're in the civilian sector now. I would suggest that it's even tougher for those of us who have retired in the last, I probably say, and I'm not going to talk about presidential parties or any of that kind of stuff, but I think
we could do that at another time.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it today. Let's not do it today.
I do think it's tougher for those of us that retired in the last 10, maybe 12 years, when you think about the wokeness of society and what they're trying to do to the military. And you spent X number of years protecting something, and then you turn on the TV. You ask the question, what turns you on? And I'll get to that. But what turns me off is when your father spent his years, mine, yours, Noel, me, and then you watch this society pay no regard to any of it. The Constitution. I mean, you got one that says that the Second Amendment's not absolute. Okay. Wow. Does that mean the 13th Amendment, slavery, is that absolute or not? The woman's right to vote, is that absolute or not? So I'm watching this country that we protected not even respect itself. Now, that said, that's why I'm retired and I'm not in the workforce. And what turns me on is, my wife and I laughing about the fact that we're having a cup of coffee this morning and said, what we're doing tomorrow? We're jumping in our own airplane. We're flying to Miami. We're going to a resort. And then at 7 o'clock in the evening, we're going to Hard Rock Stadium and watching our Raiders play.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
When do you want to come
Raiders
back?
Fans. I didn't know you were Raiders fans.
Yeah.
They're in Vegas now.
And then I looked,
which is awesome. So
and then I looked at her and said, do you want to just fly straight back, or do you want to go to Naples? No, let's go to Naples and spend another night. It's just that freedom.
Yeah.
So the sacrifices she made in the military, and the fire department turned into a pension. My sacrifices turned into a pension, and we just get to sit back, and at best, we're annoyed by what we see in the news.
Well,
it's just an annoyance. It doesn't really affect us.
Yeah, you're right. And to your point about the time you spent in, and you were tasked with protecting the nation, all that kind of stuff. One of my favorite lines, and I'll paraphrase. I don't remember the exact, but one of my favorite little commentaries from movies that talks about the military was in A Few Good Men, and where Jack Nicholson's character talks about standing on the wall, and people stand on the wall, and they're ready to engage in combat, or to protect whatever our political system wants us to protect. I mean, we're obviously at the whim of politics and the decisions made by Washington, D.C. But someone can go 20, 30 years in the military, never have to jump off the wall and actually engage.
Mhm.
They're
Yeah,
just there, right? But they're there.
yeah,
But that's
yeah,
what they're tasked to do. And in these last 20 years, a lot of people jumped off the wall and pulled their trigger
yeah.
and done different things. So yeah, I get you there. It's
But even that person,
there's two ways to look at it. Go ahead.
but even that person who stood on the wall and never had to jump off that wall still voluntarily sacrificed a lot of their constitutional
Oh,
rights
that's what I'm saying. What I'm
in
saying,
that
that's
uniform.
what that's completely my point.
Yeah,
Regardless of if they had to do to actually engage, they were there and they were willing to. And the other aspect is, and people say this, and there's probably some truth to it, and probably uh, there's two ways or some different ways to look at it. Someone in 1980 speaking to somebody a person that served in World War II would have said, "Hey, I can't believe what's going on today in the
Yeah.
Oh,
military and
yeah,
in
yeah,
We
yeah.
society."
used to beat
So
each other up
so
in boot
that
camps.
yeah, things move on, and people have different perspectives, and society changes, and for the better and for the worse, no question. And we're in a divisive time now in the United States for a number of reasons. But like I said, we can have a podcast on politics at a separate date.
I guess my only point is this: even in the 1940s, we had a president in office who used the phrase "the buck stops here." And
Yeah.
when you're a commanding officer in the military, you know this as well as I do. There were certain answers that just were not allowed to come out of our mouths. Among them, not my fault, was
Yeah.
their fault, I didn't know, whatever else. You were not going to be protected from the failings of that unit. And to have, and I value and love the fact that we have civilian oversight over our military, and this should not be any different than that. But at some point, that civilian oversight might want to express a monicum of the honor and the integrity and the commitment that those people that they order off that wall have to
Yeah.
show.
Cool. So, Noel, what's your retirement excitement and story?
Oh
And
my
again,
gosh.
besides getting up with next to Dimitri Delgado,
The great
the great
Dimitri
and
Delgado.
powerful, the great and
The great
powerful.
and powerful.
So
Oh,
you had a badass with
dream
the
come
great and
true.
powerful.
Yeah,
That's a kind of an interesting mix.
Well, just for me, PT, working out has always been a huge focus in my life. Since I was a very little kid, I've always enjoyed it. Swim practice, swim team, all that stuff since I can remember. So PT is very, very important to me. So I do a boot camp. I don't know if you've ever heard of a burn boot camp, but it's
Yeah,
basically it's high intensity interval training stations.
And I decline the invitation daily.
I keep asking, please come. It's gonna be not too hard today. It's gonna be legs or upper body, and he just before I
don't
can
forget
even
leg day. You can't forget leg day.
never forget leg day.
I did legs yesterday, but I did it at my pace, not hers.
Well,
Yeah.
even my daughters joke about kids they know. It's like they never do leg day. That's kind of a joke.
Yeah, for me, leg day is always a favorite of mine.
Yeah, same.
But it's very weight centric and not so much cardio sometimes. So I always have to back it up. But yeah, PT for me is huge. I need it for my mental wellness and not just my physical. So that coupled with seeing our beautiful three horses, our Arabians, to me is also huge. I need it just because they're beautiful, and I love the fact that I need to go there to take care of them. Our stallion has a summer sore that needs dressings. We got it. I met with the vet, and we got it debulked, and it's basically like a festering wound that that just kind of doesn't go away. So you need to debulk it, debride it, and then
It feeds her medical background, doesn't it?
Now, Noah, you were the pilot first, right? You were started flying initially. Is that
No,
right?
we both did. We were both going through the training together. Yeah,
Okay.
we both did
Oh.
it together. Yeah,
At the same time.
same pace. He ended up getting his check ride before mine.
Okay.
But that's maybe a week or two before me.
Which brings
So,
another story up. So at the airport we were training at, there's a pilot lounge. And she and I walked into the pilot lounge. She said, "I don't think we're supposed to be in here because this is for pilots and we're not pilots yet." I said, okay, whatever.
Follow the
Roger
Not a
that.
rules.
pilot. I
Follow
can't
the
even
rules.
look at that room.
Roger that. So we walked out.
He stayed. I left.
No, I walked out. But I got my
Afterwards.
check ride and got my pilot's license a week before she did, just because of the way the timing happened. And that day I told her, I said, I'll be in the pilot's lounge. You can catch up when you get over there.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Isn't there a thing about a t-shirt when you do your solo? Do you
Yeah.
do like a
Yeah.
t-shirt or something?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm going to show them to
Right
you.
there.
Yeah, let me see.
So as she gets them, I'll tell you the story. So in the old days, when you had pilot training fore and aft, when you had the guy in the front, the guy in the back with the open cockpit,
yeah,
they couldn't communicate with each other. So the instructor was in the back seat and would grab the bottom of the shirt. And if he wanted you to turn right, he'd pull right. And if you do left, he'd pull left, go up, go down. So the tradition is after you do your solo flight, they cut the back of the shirt off because you don't need anybody to do your wings.
There we go. Oh, cool.
So this is Dimitri's.
Yeah.
So the November 90 Mike X-ray, that was
Is that the
his
tail
plane.
number?
Yeah, that's what he flew. It's a light sport.
Look at the day.
And
it's Easter.
4-4. Wow. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
can you see that? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can.
you got it.
Yeah,
Where's yours?
Yeah.
It's completely.
And then mine is.
Look at the day.
Can you see that?
Memorial Day.
Okay?
Hey, 5/31. All right.
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I'll say this, you eventually get your license and you're done, but it's that check ride where you finally become that pilot is nowhere near as exciting as that solo flight, that first solo flight.
Yeah.
Because you've been flying around with your instructor. All of a sudden they say, you ready to go? Yeah, I'm ready to go. They get out. They tell you to do 3 laps around and 3 landings around the airport. Now you're communicating with the tower. There's no oversight. It's the coolest thing ever. But I'm going to tell you right now, man, if for anybody else, and you said you were envious of this, I say that's nonsense. If we can do it, anybody can do it. So go do it. So you got this.
Get it done.
You get in this airplane.
Get your pilot's license. It's fun.
The instructor gets out. You're listening to the weather. You get on with ground. You taxi over to the runway. You get your clearance to take off. It's the coolest thing in the world. You apply that power. All of a sudden, the airplane's acting differently because you just lost 200 pounds of dead weight when the instructor got out. So it's acting differently. And it's the coolest thing in the world until you pull back on the yoke and rotate. Now you're airborne and it hits you. Oh, man, I have to bring it back down. And it's very rewarding, very exciting. Yeah. And it's the highlight because anything after that is just kind of finishing up, crossing T's, dotting I's.
Well, I always wonder if how different my life would have been if I'd have gone to flight school and become just a military pilot.
Yeah.
Because now most of my buddies, almost all of my friends ended up being Navy or Marine Corps pilots. And then now 90% of them fly for the airlines.
Yeah.
And which seems, and they tell me they're flipping switches in a 7 whatever aircraft. It's pretty, but we used to, when I was stationed in San Diego at MCRD, I lived with a Navy pilot, and the group of folks I hung out with, we would take small like Cessnas up, and in fact we did a trip to oh god, it's that little gambling town on the Colorado River, right where Arizona, Nevada, California meet. What's that? Something City.
Have a Bullhead City.
Bullhead City. Bullhead City's where we landed, and then we went across the river to.
You landed there too.
That's where I landed.
That's where I landed. We stayed in the Hyatt. It was a 24-hour. Glad there was no cell phones. It was 24 hours of gambling and craziness, and then we flew back to San Diego. But
that's where I landed my first cross-country trip out of Vegas. Yeah.
Bullhead City, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's where we landed.
Yeah.
I can tell you that growing up in Rota Naval Station, Spain, when the fleet would come in, there is no better sound in the world than a Cobra.
Oh yeah,
no better sound in the world. That is the best sound. I know it's not fixed wing, but that is the best.
Cobra's, they're the
those pilots. Those pilots are badass.
Back to back. Yeah, the fleet coming in. I'll tell a quick story. So the fleet would come in, and they had the rotating CB battalion would come through.
Yeah.
Rota. So I was lifeguarding. I think it was the summer I was back between naps and school, whatever. And I was down at the industrial. They had to pull down the industrial.
Yeah, I worked there too.
and it was a kids' party. It was like a birthday party or something. 9-year-olds, two sailors. I think they were sailors. Just totally blitzed. Just walked in, stripped
Yeah.
to nothing, and jumped in the water. So we had to call the shore patrol and get these guys were totally. So when the fleet comes in, means some things to different people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I know. I know. It's
You
crazy.
you alluded to, wondering to yourself, how would life have been different if you had gotten into naval aviation? And I can certainly do the same thing, and I've done it on occasion. What if I had left OCS and went to Quantico and went to the Marine Corps? What if I had waited the 2 years to go to the Navy?
Yeah.
And I always come to the same conclusion. I wouldn't be sitting here next to her right now. I would not be living the life I do right now. So why in the world would I want to? I mean, it's cool to look back and wonder, but why would I worry about changing anything that happened?
Yeah, and it's things have fallen into place, and I'm blessed and fortunate with my
Yeah,
career outside of the military. You know,
yeah,
you may not know this, but so I left active duty. I ended up getting a job through one of those agencies. It was Lucas Associates. I went to New York. I was a training manager, so I was delivering a corporate leadership training program, and that I was certified to deliver. It was called Frontline Leadership by a company called Zinger Miller. And the guy that hired me had been a Marine Corps corporal and got into HR. So he hired me at this company. I was on the JFK complex in New York, and I lived on Long Island, Long Beach. Wasn't super happy up there, but I was in Atlanta to get certified for this course, and there was a guy who was actually a lieutenant in Rota, Spain, and he was the aviation supply officer for VQ2. And my father dealt with him, and he's a 1978 Naval Academy graduate, Sean Bradley. And my dad said, "Go downstairs and meet this guy." Ask him about the academy. And his roommate was another academy guy. They both lived out in Fuente Bravia, and the other guy was a helicopter station pilot. And I went to a party at their house. His name was Frank Bean. And we went to this party at their house, and they were all liquored up. And Sean gave me a couple of pieces of ridiculous advice. But I remember seeing Sean's name when I was active duty in the back of the Navy Times. Back then, there wasn't a separate Marine Corps Times. It says Navy
yeah.
Times, the Marine Corps section. And he was working at a company called Lucas Associates, running the military like recruiting thing. So Sean and I was in Atlanta to see an old friend, and I stopped by his office just in the 10 minutes because he was super busy, and just said hello. And I was still active duty. And then when I got out, I went through Lucas. I didn't know he had left it. And then he had left and started his own company called Bradley Morris. And I met with him when I was in Atlanta. We had dinner. He was playing up this recruiting thing. And I was looking for a new job, and he said, "Come down to Atlanta. You can interview with some companies through Bradley Morris." So I interviewed, and then at the end of the day, he goes, "What would you think of coming to work for me?" And I was like, "Wow, I don't know what that even recruiting. I'd never considered it." And he talked something about 100% commission, which I did not understand. I soon, so I said, yeah, I trusted him, and that's when I started my recruiting career. But it sort of fit me as an individual and my personality. I just fell into it, and it's history at this point. But yeah, so that's kind of how I ended up in being a recruiter and getting into the supporting transition. Was this dude that I met in Rota, this lieutenant who my father knew, but I was always
Networking right
someone to
there.
do it. What's that?
It's networking right there.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say I've always been someone that had it that liked to network and to keep in touch with people and all that. And it
Is there
served
any
me
is
well.
there any aspect of your current life that you would give away?
I mean, no. I mean, I'm
No.
I'm I'm super fortunate in the job I have today to serve military, active duty, and veterans in what I do
Yeah.
every day. How many people get to do that?
And my answer is the exact same, which is why I don't go, "Oh man, I wish I would have done
Yeah,
this. I
yeah.
wish
But you always
wish I
think
would have
about
done."
it.
Yeah.
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 You always think about it. You kind of like
Yeah.
you've been up
Yeah.
there,
The
but
trajectory of your life.
no, I don't regret. I don't have regrets, and there's two things that most people who know me long enough know. really don't have any regrets, and I don't hold any grudges.
Yeah.
You know, if you were pissed off, it's an hour later, it's done. It's gone.
Hmm.
I don't think about it. And that's with my family, with friends,
Yeah.
anybody I know. If I get in an argument with you and okay, boom, it's done. It's forgotten. I don't think about it. It doesn't impact my relationship. I
Yeah.
move on. That's
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
that's me. And 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 I think that served me well over my long career. I'm staring 60 in the face there, folks. I got
Ah,
I'm less than a year
60,
away
60 is
from
the new
isn't
40.
60 the new 58 now or something like
Yeah.
that?
Oh, no,
I'm
no.
going to say even lower. I think 60 is the new 40. I
I'm
really
just
do. I
kidding.
think that if you take care of yourself and you work out and you're doing some of the things that you enjoy and just be around healthy people, I
Well,
think that,
yeah. No,
I
you're
think,
right. You're
I'll
right.
be
yeah,
I'll be 58 in February. I retired at 48. So I don't even know if my
Yeah.
58 is truly a 58.
right.
My 58 might be a 48. I don't know. It's just
And I don't forget leg day, so I'm kind
Don't
of good.
forget leg day. Well,
I'm doing good.
yeah,
I
I've always
remember your
I've
legs
always been
being,
proud of my legs.
your legs have
I've got
always
some
been
big
pumps.
calves.
I
That's
always
one thing.
said
I have
I
big
always said
calves.
Oh,
I always said
abs.
if Poncho had any more calf, you'd have to milk it.
I got some, and I don't know. I think that's just genetics. You know, it's a Lowland Scots Irish background of my father's side. These
Well,
stout.
same here because my center of gravity is exceedingly low, and and I could swear that my ancestry were we picked potatoes
Yeah,
and we're
so
keepers. That's what we are.
I,
We're
I
just
can't
farmers.
I can't buy pants off the rack because there's very few pants that come in 28 inseam. I have to buy them online. My legs are short, and so I there's a couple of companies I can get online where they sell it 28 inseam. Because other than that, I'm getting them. I spend some money getting pants hemmed up when I go shopping. So it's, my legs are short. But I think, like I said, I think it was good for soccer. It helped me out a little
Oh
bit having
yeah,
a little low
yeah.
center of gravity. And
And
well,
you
one thing
probably
too,
don't
we didn't.
you
What's that?
won't have the back issues that 6'3" winds up with after a while.
Well, one thing I wanted to touch on that we didn't discuss earlier, and I had this discussion actually with somebody we all know, Rodney Urbano, just
Hey,
recently. I was in Hawaii and happened to have dinner with him. It's great to always see him. I get to Oahu for work, which is awesome, and then been there outside of work as well. But had dinner with him. He had some kids staying with him, like a friend that he knew actually from the Philippines when he lived there growing up. This other guy was his daughter, and then another friend's kids. And his daughter's his youngest is in college now, and we had talked about getting to Rota, where we were both the new guy, and playing sports and doing well, whatever. And I just remember I came in and was on the football team that fall, and there was a little bit of friction with some of the other people, some of the other guys on the football team who I don't know didn't like me for whatever reason. It was probably easy, um, but we talked about that new guy sort of or new person um, dynamic that occurs when you show up at especially a base. Like if you live in the civilian world and go to San Diego, you're just out of school, you're just another new person. And typically those schools are bigger too. You got a
Yeah.
bigger population just to
yeah,
blend into. But when you get the Rhoda my high school in Pensacola, I was in a class of like 500 plus kids. And
Mm.
then I went to a class of 43 or something in
yeah,
Rhoda.
yeah,
So yeah, that new guy, new person mentality or dynamic when you show up and you're competing for girlfriends and sports and I'm competitive especially sports. I'm competitive.
Yeah.
I'm single focused when I'm playing sports, and I don't care how big you are. So, I'm gonna do
You're
what
fearless.
I, yeah, I'm gonna be focused for sports. And but yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting that discussion because we were talking about it with these college age young people who were staying at Rodney's house about how it was for us showing up in road as the new guy and
Hmm.
having to fit in and meet new friends. And that's kind of our lives, especially for Dimitri and I, who moved around. But you had to meet new people as well, Noel, as over your time in Rota. Comment on that a little bit.
I resented, you know, sixth grade, I'm the new guy in Sigonella. Eighth grade, I'm the new guy back in Lemoore. Ninth grade, I'm the new guy at Yohai. Halfway through the school year, I'm the new guy at Zama. 2 years later, I'm the new guy at Rota. You know, Mario, my brother that you knew, he went all 4 years in Rota. He never had to be the new guy.
Right.
He also had, and he resented this, he also had a big brother who just wouldn't allow anything to. And in fact, I was bullied pretty hard at Yohai.
Really?
A lot of the names you and I were
By
throwing
some people I know, by some people I know, probably.
Teddy
Because
Rice,
all those folks were like, well, what am I, 2 years older than you, right?
Yeah. So Teddy Rice, Chibi Cook, James Cook, David Boykin. Yeah, they were all terrors. And by the time I became that 6'3", 200 and whatever pound senior in high school, it was just forbidden. You weren't allowed.
Probably deserved it. You probably deserved a little bit of it.
Probably, but that's neither here nor there. And, yeah. And boy, they were inventive in their torture too. But so I resented being the new guy. I got tired of it after a while.
Yeah.
But I also got very adept at being the new guy, and I knew what the test was, I knew what the goal was, and I knew how to solve it very, very quickly. And in Rota, by the time I got to Rota and they tested me, I got in my first fist fight third day. I'll leave the names out of it because they didn't fare very well. It was 2 against 1.
Yeah.
But by that time, I'd already been the new guy 5 times, and I knew how this game was played, and you know, solved it. Noel's going to tell you a different story altogether because
he's such a nice person too.
Well, she was the steady state. She was never the new person. But go ahead.
The badass nice person.
Oh gosh, no. Plus, I was so young when
Were you a catty teenage high school girl, or
actually, honestly, I had a lot of acquaintances. I was friends with.
Excuse me a moment.
I was friends with the potheads. I was friends with the jocks. I was friends with all the different dynamics in high school, but I was friends with all of them. But I only had maybe 1 or 2 close friends.
Yeah.
And I kept to myself mostly. Honestly, I was kind of quiet. I wasn't a cheerleader. I didn't participate in. I participated in all the sports.
Right.
But I just
what did you play?
It was gymnastics. Every summer it was the swim team.
Yeah.
Volleyball.
Well, you know, because I really didn't know you in Rota. I mean, I knew you. I didn't know you that well. I just knew you from being at your house and dropping off Johanna from playing tennis or coming up and seeing your parents and talking to them, because it was you and Loopy, as we called her.
Yeah, and Loopy. Yeah, nobody knows her name is Loopy.
Yeah, you and Loopy were like sitting down, and I don't know, you were probably like, who is this guy bringing Johanna home from tennis or whatever?
No, I mean, everybody was enamored with you. I was enamored with you because my parents were enamored with you. And I remember my mom, after you would leave or whatever, my mom would say, to Johanna, can't you just be with him, you know, or why isn't he your boyfriend or something like that? And I would listen.
At that point, we were 4 years. She was 8th grade, and I was a senior in high school. That would have been a bit awkward.
That probably, but I didn't know any of that stuff. I didn't know any of how old you were.
That might have gotten me in trouble.
Yeah, no doubt.
A senior in high school and an 8th grader. Now, when she was in college, it would have been a different.
Yeah.
And you know,
my parents were enamored.
Because I remember seeing her at Florida when she was in ROTC, and then at Fort Hood, I believe. Yeah, Fort Hood.
Yeah.
So go ahead. You were saying, so you had a couple of close friends. You played all the sports, and
yeah, I just I really didn't get into any cliques. I wasn't into the
across the board. You were like across the board. You could fit into any clique.
I fit into everybody, and I had friends with everybody, and I was friends with everybody. I got along with everybody. I as far as I can remember, I've never been interested in being cliques is one thing, but I just didn't involve myself in a lot of social
Hygiene.
Well,
hygiene.
I mean, if I
guess.
remember
I just
correctly,
didn't kept to myself.
you could talk to anybody in Rota and nobody would have said a bad thing about Johanna or you or your family.
Yeah,
Your parents were just the most
absolutely.
most wonderful people. And yeah, so the kind of thing about our experience in Rota, which I thought was awesome, was we would take a bus trip overnight to from Rota up to Madrid
Oh,
to play Torrejon, and we'd play
yeah,
or to Zaragoza, which was even further away.
yeah.
And those were party trips. And I remember we were on a trip on my birthday, driving up. It was soccer season in the spring, and we drove up. And back then there were no kind of interstates or highways. We went through every town on the way, and they switched up a bus driver. And our teachers had a huge thing of wine up front with them. They're getting liquored up, and then we would
I
arrive
didn't
and we
know
would
that.
sleep. And oh yeah, they were getting Mr. Hindi, who's the tennis
Oh,
coach. And
really?
then what was it? Mr. Ferguson was a soccer coach, I think, that year.
Ferguson
Or
was basketball
he
coach.
was basketball. Well, I think he was
He did,
coaching
he
soccer
did
that year
multiple
too.
things.
Yeah, he did multiple. So, but
Remember
they
that?
were
Remember
drinking
the
up front.
That's
remember the little
hilarious.
wooden platforms we would build to fill in the gap in the row so you could
Yeah,
sleep on the
yeah,
floor?
yeah. And then we would sleep on the floor of the gym, sleeping bags, and the teachers would go out partying, and they'd get in at like 3 or 4 a.m. and we'd
Yeah.
lock the doors and let them in. But those trips. So I remember I was my birthday, and I think I drank a beer or something. Oh, it was my 18th birthday that year. But those experiences of going up and playing, so we would play all the teams that weekend, and and then as we alluded to earlier, Dimitri and I both lived in Japan, and the same thing. We would take a bus ride. Um, one of my He's one of my closest friends. Even today, we were both same grade in Japan. His mother's Japanese, a guy named Tom Cardenas, um, and we played basketball together and football and baseball, and like driving up to Yokota Air Force Base or to Zama,
Yeah.
and we'd play the sports against all these other schools.
ASIJ and Masao.
ASIJ,
Yeah.
exactly. American School
Didn't
Japan.
you find that being in Japan was, well, it's not like the States. It was a lot more like the States than Rota was.
Yeah, yeah. And the one thing too is yeah, Japan. So I had great the memories of Japan and Rota too, but just it was only 1 year in Rota. But the memories of Japan, that was just I don't know if it's just the age or the era or my friends, what I was doing. But boy, in fact, I was in this is the summer of 1976, and I was with Tom, I just mentioned, and another friend of ours who was full Japanese, but played sports with us. I think the dad worked for the Navy or something. We went to Kawasaki Stadium, and it was the Giants, the Tokyo Giants,
Yeah,
and I
Yomiuri.
was it. And I was in the stadium when Sadaharu O hit his 700th home run,
Yeah. Wow.
and
Wow.
then we were taking the
He was
train
the
up
Babe
there.
Ruth of Japanese baseball.
Oh,
Yeah, he's the home run king of Japanese baseball, and he had this interesting the way he batted. He lifted up his leg.
Lifted up his leg. Yeah.
Yeah, lifted up his left-handed. But yeah, so and we would take the train. So my mother, I told her later in life, I would tell my mother because my father was gone, that I was going to spend a night with Tom up in Nagishi, which is the other housing area up the
Nagishi.
hill,
Yeah.
Nagishi Heights.
Yeah.
And we were on the train that night to Tokyo. She had no
oh
idea.
my
And I
gosh.
was
Good
I was
hunch.
12 years old, and my mother had no idea.
No.
So we'd be in Tokyo for the night, and we'd get back at midnight. And Tom's parents, his mother's Japanese, she didn't care.
It's safe.
So
It's
I
super
was I
safe,
was running
right?
all over the place. So my mother had no idea that I was
Oh my God.
all over
The
Japan.
the nightmare of living in Japan is when you're a sophomore in high school going through growth spurts and it's the new sport and you either need new basketball shoes or new cleats and you go to a sports store in Japan and they laugh that you even thought they had that size.
Well, yeah, I have big for my I have size 11. I have kind of big feet,
You
but
look like an L.
I'm like I think I'm like a clown, big clown feet.
Just a
Yeah, I'm
big
size
L.
11. Yeah, exactly. But Yeah, you know what they say. And
Yeah, yeah. They wear big
but
shoes.
no, we used to go to this Japanese sports place, and the guy we had our I think we were wearing the Tigers, Onitsuga Tiger.
Basics.
But
Yeah.
they used to this guy, the owner of the Japanese sports shop, would make a little leather thing for the toe of our shoe because I was a pitcher. And you know
Oh yeah.
how you
Oh
drag
yeah.
your foot. He'd
Oh
make
yeah.
this little leather thing to put on your shoe so your
Yeah.
shoe wouldn't break down and
Yeah.
as you drag your foot as a pitcher. Yeah, I had
Yeah.
some good baseball years. In fact, we won the All-Star championship um, at Yokohama when I was sixth grade, I think. And then basketball, we got second place to Yokota. We beat Tachikawa in the semifinals on a last second shot. Um, so yeah, those were good sports years too. That's probably why I really
Well,
enjoyed it.
I can remember playing baseball at Zama. We're playing against a Japanese high school. I hit this seeing eye dog grounder to the shortstop. I'm hustling down first base. He throws the ball to first base, and the first baseman drops the ball, and I'm safe. And then the guilt sets in when the Japanese manager calls timeout. The team runs off to the field, lines up. He takes the hat off that kid's head and starts beating him with his hat
Oh,
for dropping the ball. And you're standing on first base going, dude, I'm sorry, man. Wow. Yeah.
Well, the whole sports thing, because we're all all three of us athletes, and playing in college or whatever. You're the dream as the kid, right? You're dreaming to play in the, you know, professional or whatever. And I remember I collected baseball cards, big or all the cards when I was a little kid. I had boxes of cards. I probably should have kept those things. They might have been
yeah.
valuable today. But you're growing up, and the one thing about living overseas is I think the parents and the teachers, and not that it's so hugely different, but I mean they're so supportive of the kids and there's a lot of volunteer parents that are there coaching, and it happens in civilian world. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen because I see it where I live today. Parents that are out there supporting their kids and volunteering, but I think it's just such a closed environment overseas. I don't know when you were in Japan. What years, Dimitri?
79 to 81.
Okay, yeah. So we right after we were there, we left in '76,
Yeah.
and there was a women's softball league, and one of the teams was called the Streakers, and that was the era of streakers. And every game they played in,
They were
somebody
streaks.
was streaking.
Are you serious? One
You
of the
know,
players would do that?
if
Not the players. No,
Oh.
somebody would jump off of the fence and run through the field.
if you know anybody that's involved in TV production, I have a show idea. And it has to do with what we're talking about right now. So if you went to a lake and caught a minnow and pulled it out of the lake when it was a child, took it home, put it in a fish bowl, nice controlled environment, clean water, everything else, and it grows up to adulthood, and then you took that same fish and threw it back in the original lake, how would it fare? And the notion is that we growing up the way we did, we grew up with certain attributes and certain skills. And there were certain that we missed out on because we were not growing up stateside in our original pond. And then when we became adults, we're thrown back into this pond and told, go be successful. Now, you can have a debate about what attributes you need to be successful. So I'd like to do this TV show where you took 10 kids that grew up like we did. You take 10 kids that grew up in the same house on the same street with the same friends in the same school their whole life, and then put them through a series of things, whether it was academics or social or world information. The audience votes people. You can even put them in date situations, right? Take a guy like us, and then put them on a date with a girl from the stateside, and then have the parents watching how everybody reacts and see whether or not he's a gentleman or he's actually putting hands on her, that type of thing. Because you know how we grew up. You'd have 8, 9, 10 people together going out as a group. There was no date going on. Anyway, call this show Peer Pressure. The audience votes people out, and whoever's left standing at the end gets a full ride to college, But I think it would serve to show people, as you're raising kids, limits are good. Yeah. Freedom is good. There's a balancing act there. You can't shelter them too much. You can't let, maybe at 12 they should be on a train going to Tokyo.
Yeah, I think the trust our parents had in maybe not us so much, but the environment more so. Like in Rota, hitchhiking on the base or going out to
When I
town,
was
and they knew we were drinking too, and they knew we were drinking.
When I was a freshman at Purdue, I had a group of guys go, let's go get a case of beer and go out to the Kmart parking lot and get drunk. I said, for what? Last week I was at the Shack drinking 43 and Coke. You know what I mean?
Moment of silence for the Shack.
Yeah, moment of silence for the Shack.
Moment of silence. A lot of, the memory of the Shack is, they had the jukebox, right? And that the song Nights in White Satin.
Nights in White Satin.
That played there all the time. And then across the street was that Angelo's discoteca there. And I get back to Rota, so I went to see my parents. So when I was born in my parents' apartment, and this family that rented it to my parents. We know the family, they're like Rota family, whatever. And I went to see that one of the remaining ladies that are older, like my mother's age, in the 80s. And her name's Paca, and she was still there.
Wow.
Went by and see her, and she was like, "Who's down there?" Because she lives up these stairs. He doesn't really come down the stairs. And I said, "It's Pancho." And she knew who I was right away.
Wow.
She carried me up. So, and we FaceTimed my mother, which was kind of cute. But well, hey, anything else? One thing I want to before, and Noel, you probably, it's an easy answer for you, but what's the favorite place you ever lived?
Vegas.
Vegas, all right.
Yep, Vegas. And I think it's because um I have this very loyal person, and I just went through so much there and
Yeah.
accomplished so much there, and met some of the greatest people on the face of the planet there. Worked with some of the best people in the world there as a firefighter. And just I watched it grow, and it has its problems, but it's a living, breathing, beautiful city with beautiful people that come from all over the place. And Vegas, I mean, yeah, it has the gambling and it has the casinos and stuff like that, but to me, it's more than just a place. It's a way of life that I cherish, and it's because of the people and their drive, their entrepreneurship, and just their excellence. Actually, just the people that I've worked with are some of the best in the world.
All right, Dimitri.
I have
It's hard for me.
I have very fond memories of everywhere I've ever lived. I get to relive them every time a certain song comes on, right? There'll be a song come on and I'll go.
I heard Whip It this morning driving into work.
Right.
Was that Devo?
The Daz
Devo.
Band. The Daz Band. No,
Oh, Whip
okay.
It Good. That's for me, that's
Whip
Rota.
It Good.
That's Rota.
Yeah, that's Rota.
So,
That's a Daz Band. Yeah, Whip It.
that's Italy, that's Japan, that's Spain, that's whatever. So fond of everything. My favorite place, right here in this house next to her.
Oh man!
Aww.
Oh man! He knows how to keep the fire burning there.
It just,
All right.
listen. I can go back to Lemoore, California, stand there and not recognize anybody, which means the place is about the people.
Yeah, that's true. Always.
I can go back to Rota right now. It's not going to be the same Rota. I went back to Rota in 2014. It's not the same Rota.
No,
People
not at
are.
all. I saw Seb a couple of years ago.
I saw Seb, and Seb, it was great to see Seb and
Yeah.
hang out with Seb. But you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I go to Chiclana because of my family there. Well, hey, this is the longest podcast I've ever done, but I had double the pleasure. And
you have editing,
just like a thrombo or something like that. What do you call this?
You have editing abilities to get it down to about 20 minutes. Yeah.
What's that?
You have editing abilities to get it down to about 20 minutes.
No editing, man. I don't edit this content. The only thing I edit if something goes wrong, like with lighting or I can't hear you or something. I don't edit. I've only edited one, and it was because there was some issue that the computer went down, so we had to
Yeah.
edit kind of the flowing that together. So I really don't edit. I try and make
Well,
just open.
can I, as we close, can I say something to your veterans that watch?
Yeah, I think it's mostly veterans.
Thanks for your service.
Yeah,
Everything's going to be okay. If
yeah.
if you think about back to the roughest times of your life, they never lasted forever. So I don't know how you're feeling today, but let's just make sure you're with us again tomorrow morning, because 22 a day is too much. It's really not that bad, shipmates, and thanks for your service.
Anything else you guys want to say?
Yeah, I echo that completely. Thank you for your service. I'm very happy to be here and happy to talk. And it was a pleasure, and it was fun to reminisce about all the idiosyncrasies of being a vet, but also to just being kind of a Navy brat, as it were. It was fun.
Yeah, being really fortunate kids having
Very, very
Rhoda,
blessed.
and Rhoda was just at that as Dimitri said, places change, you go back, it's not the same, but
Mhm.
it was what it was when we were there. It
That's
was
right,
really
and that's what
super-
matters.
That's
yeah,
okay with
super
me, because
cool.
I go back there. I will make myself acquainted with the new Rota, and I'll
Mhm.
love the new Rota as much as I love the old
Mhm.
Rota. So it's all okay.
Yeah, I think I've only met one person ever who said they didn't like being in Rhoda, because I've never.
Crazy.
And when they said that, I'm like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
Did you just stay on the base? Is what it was my
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
question. It's like, are
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
just someone that's kind of wild? But I may see you guys. I will be in your area in Orlando, and then I'm coming over to Tampa St. Pete right after the New Year, like January,
Go.
whatever
Oh,
it is, 7 or
let's
8.
see
So
each
I'll come
other.
over and yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be staying in Orlando over like 3 or 4 days, and then I'm gonna go over and hang out in Tampa and St. Pete, and then
Now,
I'm
what's your military status? You're military retired as well?
yes, and then I'm now fully retired with benefits. I'm getting my reserve,
Which means we can
which
all
means I'm getting my pension now.
which also means you can come here, we can jump in our airplane, we can fly to Norfolk, Virginia, and grab a Space A flight to Rota.
That's true. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm fully retired in that sense. I can. Yeah, and I've thought about it. Once my daughter is out of high school, my wife and I have a lot of options that kind of just go where we want to go. We're
Yeah.
gonna start living in places for a month or two just to see where we like
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. So, um, yeah, the Space A, I've thought about that, and I used to do it quite a bit when I was on active duty. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I'll be in your area, so look forward to seeing you
Okay.
guys, and it'll be right after the New Year, and if not sooner. And
Dale.
vale, hombre, vale, niña. So, well, great. Well, hey, thank you very much. I'm glad I reached out. It was I've never had it with two people, but it was double the pleasure and a lot of cool stuff to talk about.
Your first threesome. Congratulations.
Ah, ah,
Okay.
yikes.
No comment on that one.
Right.
So, but yeah, so yeah. Okay.
I don't know where you
That's
go
a
from
great way
there.
to end. That's a great
Yeah.
way to end the first and I'm gonna stop the recording on that thing and
Good
then
seeing you, Marine.
It was
yeah,
great to see you,
it's
and
good to
we
see
look
you
forward to seeing you in
yeah, and
January.
hang on, don't go anywhere. But
All right.
so yeah, thanks everybody and we will do this again soon.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Right.